Hi, welcome back, everyone. Continuing on with our sessions, I hope the ones that you've experienced so far have been productive, engaging, and informative. I've certainly enjoyed being a participant in them and hearing some of the comments that were made. So moving on to something which I think is of critical importance, and I hope that it's something which people are paying due attention to, and this will be informative. In my prior position with McGraw-Hill, I focused exclusively in the math sphere, so mostly focused on developmental math. And from all of the conversations I had with faculty around the country for the 4 years I was in that role, it was abundantly clear that one of the largest hurdles to college completion was math. It was generally seen as a make-or-break course for a lot of students, and the make-or-break on whether they would graduate at all. So this area in particular, I think, is of huge importance when considering institutional effectiveness, as its impact can be far-reaching as far as student outcomes. So I'm very excited that we're able to have Dr. John Hansen join us today from Iowa Central Community College. John has taught courses ranging from developmental math to differential equations and computer science for over 25 years. Recently, he's been involved in the redesign of the developmental math sequence at Iowa Central, along with implementing ALEKS placement preparation and learning for mandatory math placement. He served on several statewide committees focused on mandatory placement for all students attending a public higher education institution across the state of Iowa. And then academically, he received his BA in Mathematics and Computer Science from Augustana College in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and received his MS in Mathematics from South Dakota State University. And then after working on his PhD at Iowa State University, he took a full-time teaching position at Iowa Central in the early 90s. So I'm delighted that John's able to join us today and talk a little bit about the experience that he had on placement and math placement in particular. So without further ado, I will hand it over to John Hansen.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate the introduction. And I look forward to talking to everybody about what we have done at Iowa Central. We're very excited about everything that we've been able to accomplish by using the ALEKS PPL to place students properly. And I think you mentioned it correctly, Alex, when you said the fact that one of the big hurdles for student success and in college is mathematics. It seems like that's the barrier that most students run into, and what I'm going to show you today is basically a look back at what we did in the past at Iowa Central and our first pass through with implementing ALEKS PPL, and then where we're at currently today with some of the data that shows how successful things have been for us using ALEKS PPL to place students within their math class. As you can see, that's my contact information. If anybody ever needs to get a hold of me, please feel free to email me at the email address listed at the bottom of the slide. I'm more than happy to share this PowerPoint slide, but I'm even more than happy to talk to you about ALEKS and what kind of data we collected. And so with that, I'm going to continue to move through here. The overview of this presentation is basically going to just talk a little bit, first of all, about Iowa Central itself, what we are, where we're located, then our early adoption of the ALEKS PPL, along with how we implement it to the area high schools, and some of the success rates that we have seen from our implementation of it and what that has meant for us as faculty in the math department. And then we'll have some time for some closing statements, remarks, and if you have any questions, as always, please go ahead and ask. So first of all, Iowa Central Community College is one of 15 community colleges within the state of Iowa that we have actually now just entered our 50th year as a statewide, part of the statewide community college system. We reside in basically the center of the state of Iowa in a town called Fort Dodge, Iowa. We're a population of about 30,000 within the city of Fort Dodge, and we service a 9-county area that includes Fort Dodge, Webster City, Storm Lake, and several other communities. Fort Dodge is by far the largest community within there. I think the next community is maybe 10, 12,000. So we have roughly 5,000 full-time and part-time students that attend Iowa Central. And prior to the fall of 2000, all of our students were basically allowed to take any course they felt. We had advising, but students were allowed to be placed into any course they wanted to take, and that was a big problem for us. And most of the students were using a self-reported GPA or an ACT or SAT. SAT is not as common in the state of Iowa just because Iowa is the home state for the ACT Corporation, and they were also using Compass too. But starting in fall of 2000, we decided to move over to a mandatory placement style. And we were one of the first community colleges within the state of Iowa to actually move to a mandatory placement. Almost all community colleges have now rolled into mandatory placement, although some community colleges allow students to waive and move into a course that they want, but they're highly advised to stay in the course they're placed in. The idea for this was because we saw poor retention rates, poor success rates, and what happened is after we went to the mandatory placement, we basically saw immediate improvement in student success and retention. That is not to say we ever got to the point where we said, well, you know what, we've topped out, this is as good as we'll ever get, but rather we kind of hit a point where we said, you know, compared to where we were before, this is an improvement. And so that was kind of the start of this. And this next slide just basically shows our mandatory placement chart up through spring of 2014. So from 2000 fall to 2014 spring, our mandatory placement chart, as you can see, we had multiple different assessments that a student could use to place into specific courses. We had the ASSET, the Compass, ACT, SAT, Accuplacer, and then we have what's referred to as the ITEDS, which is it's a kind of a statewide test. And you can see the cutoffs there, and I'll talk a little bit about the individual courses that you see listed on the far right of the slide, and let you know they're kind of listed there, but I'll kind of put those into a better perspective in a little bit later slide. But that was what our mandatory placement chart was prior to the fall of 2014. Okay, now spring of 2014, the ALEKS Corporation had a statewide meeting where they wanted to talk about placement and the ALEKS PPL as a placement tool for the entire state of Iowa. And the idea was that they would like to create an environment in which the state of Iowa would do fully funding of all students' placement scores using ALEKS PPL for placement in the state of Iowa. But in order to do that, in order to move forward with that initiative, they needed to collect some data. So the ALEKS Corporation offered to any community college in the state of Iowa a pilot project where we would have a free use of the ALEKS PPL product for placement. That included 5 exams and 6 months of using the prep and learning modules. And that was an extension of what it used to be. It used to be 6 weeks, but they moved it to 6 months because they felt that that was an important tool for moving this into a more standardized form for everybody to use across the state. Their pilot project, though, required a couple of things. That, one, all cutoff scores that were to be used by any college under the pilot project were to be supplied through by ALEKS, which was not a problem. In fact, it really worked out very well because it allowed us to see the beauty of the ALEKS PPL product is the fact that we can actually look at the entire list of outcomes that the ALEKS PPL is assessing the students on. And from that, we can match those directly to our course outcomes, which allows us to look at our course outcomes, look at what they need to have in place in order to be successful in that class. We sent our syllabi to the ALEKS Corporation. They came back with a list of cutoff scores or where our courses should fit in these cutoff scores. One of the interesting things that occurred was this was in the spring of 2014, and unfortunately, we had started our enrollment prior to this for the fall. And what that allowed us to do was it allowed us to do, in fact, a really good study on the effectiveness of the ALEKS PPL versus the other placement tools. We had roughly half of the student population placed with ACT, Compass, the two most common, and the other half placed with the ALEKS PPL. So, and this was all running at the same time, which was rather unique for us because normally we would not have wanted to do that. We do not want to have multiple placement methods, but rather only one. So if we had completely switched over, we would be looking at 1 year versus another. But now we're actually looking at one set of students within the same year against another a different set. So all we had to do was, as you know, not only just take the cut scores that ALEKS provided, but we also had to then send the results back to ALEKS so they could collect the data and see whether or not the success rate was what was predicted. What we did was we would take a file, an Excel file basically, scrub all the information that was personal off of it, generate a random student ID for each of the students that was separate from their Iowa Central student ID. We would give the final ALEKS placement score that they had for placement, the course they were placed into, and their final grade. And all that information would go back. As I said, this was all part of a plan to introduce ALEKS as the statewide placement exam for all students entering mathematics in college level. Basically, what this did for us was it gave us our own data along with giving data to the ALEKS Corporation that allowed us to make some changes and do some things in our courses. And I'll talk about that as we go further along. Now, here's the current mandatory placement chart for Iowa Central. And these are the list of the courses that I was talking about. So here are the percent ranges for each of the courses. And if you look at the first three courses, the Math 045, Math 063, and Math 102, those are considered developmental math. So those would be in, and those had we had just done a math redesign where we went to a mastery base in our developmental math. So, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. But after that, we have the Math for Liberal Arts, the Math for Elementary Teachers, the Finite Math, and the Statistics, and a Business Calculus. Those are kind of non-STEM areas. And then we have our College Algebra, College Algebra with Trig, which is kind of a pre-calculus and then our calculus. And you can see those ranges. These were the ranges that ALEKS gave to us, and these are still the ranges that we're using even though we're no longer on the pilot project. We have not felt that there's any data that supports changing these cutoff scores at all. But now that we're on a paid platform instead of the pilot project, we can make our own changes to our cutoffs. But as I said, not enough data to really say that we should. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about the comparisons between the placement tools that we had used and that we are now currently using. The first thing was this idea of proctored versus unproctored. Many institutions in the state of Iowa use ALEKS in an unproctored fashion. Others, like us, we have a mixture, and I'll just kind of explain a little bit. The reason this is important is because Compass, ACT, SAT are all proctored exams for placement anyway, and we felt that we need to do the same thing here at Iowa Central. Now, the three Regents universities, the University of Iowa, Northern Iowa, the University of Northern Iowa, and Iowa State University, they all have an unproctored ALEKS assessment. We, on the other hand, have chosen to do it this route. Each student is given 5 attempts in ALEKS. The first one can be either proctored or unproctored, and we chose that for a couple of reasons. The first reason for unproctored is that the student can take the assessment and get a level of comfort that they wouldn't have if it was proctored. And that first assessment is what will be used to generate their prep and learning module for their remediation, so they can hopefully, if the score is not sufficient, they can find themselves assessing higher later on. The first assessment, if it's unproctored, is not and cannot be used for placement. Only proctored ones can. That said, as an institution that implements ALEKS, we have complete control over which assessments are proctored, which ones are unproctored, and any time constraints, things like that. These are all untimed assessments, and after the first attempt, if they want to take a second attempt, they have to wait 24 hours. They can even actually, if they are in the middle of an attempt, they can stop it and come back within 24 hours and start it up again and move and finish the assessment at a later date. And that works really well for our area high schools. Area high schools have periods that are only about 35 to 45 minutes in length. So therefore, they sometimes cannot get the entire assessment done in one sitting. So they log out, and then when they come back the next day, the proctor will re-enter the password, and they will finish the assessment the next day. So it allows students to actually do that. But what we do require is that from the second to the third to the fourth, and the fourth to the fifth assessment, we require the student to put a minimum of 5 or more hours in their prep and learning modules before they can move from the second to the third assessment. Because our data shows that students who put 5 or more hours in the prep and learning module find a significant movement on their placement score. And what we can see is that if a student falls somewhere in between, let's say they're at a 22%, 30 is where they would need to get to college level math. We see most of our students who spend 5 or more hours in a prep and learning module will reach that 30 or higher. And that's just mainly because a lot of students have been away from math long enough that the prep and learning module just reinforces some of the things that they were a little bit, what I would refer to as rusty on. It works really well, and that's one of the biggest selling points that we have. The interesting thing is what you see next, the average length of time for the assessment attempts. And when we collected our data, Compass was about 13 minutes, and ALEKS turns out to be about 73 minutes. And I think that's really significant because the difference between Compass and ALEKS is Compass was, I should say, I have to use it in the past tense, was a multiple choice assessment. And how it could determine whether or not the student made a mistake in choosing, first of all, multiple choice I have questions with them anyway, but second of all is that when you only have, I think there was 3 or 4 options, one of the options being I don't know or none of the above, you really don't know why they made a mistake in their solution. You just, you've got basically a very simple decision tree that then says, well, you made a mistake. We don't quite know what happened, but we'll send you on this pathway. Whereas ALEKS, on the other hand, it looks at the answer, identifies what happened, why you made a mistake, what were the outcomes that you were missing to be successful at that particular assessment or that particular question, and then takes you along a path of highest probability to be successful at the next question, looking at what you did on the previous one. That's one of the reasons why it takes a little bit longer, because the students have to do a free response. They are not allowed to just choose A, B, C, or D. Now, if the student doesn't know what the answer is, they can clearly put, I don't know, but they can't do that forever. ALEKS usually stops them from doing that. Okay, so a couple of things to what we found with Compass and Accuplacer was that Compass was a very poor predictor of success, and Accuplacer had about the same level of predictability as Compass. So they're really pretty much the same, although our data was relatively a small sample, less than 100 students, but it's still, I think it's enough to say that for us, Accuplacer was no better than Compass, and that was important to us. Here's what we're finding with ACT that's just rather interesting. In the 2015-2016 academic year, there were still some students being placed with ACT, and what we found was that they had a failure rate with ACT of 75%. That was just startling to us that they actually have that high a failure rate. And in fact, we actually looked even further back into the data and found that it was very close to 75%. It was more like 68% when we went years further back. But that's a very significant number of failures. We did see, though, that if the student had an ACT score of over 25 and they were placed into a non-STEM college area, field such as statistics, math or liberal arts, finite math, their likelihood of success improved. But it was really just because we kind of measure, at least I measure ACT. The ACT score is really more of a measure of student motivation than it is of student skill set. And I think that's the significant difference, is that ACT will tell you whether or not if a student is somewhat motivated. The higher the score, more likely they are serious about education and being proactive about getting help when they need it. The lower the score, I think you could probably say they're less proactive about getting help. So we did see those ranges. But again, that really kind of tells you that the ACT is not a good predictor, and it really doesn't tell us why or what they're deficient in. And especially when you're getting into the STEM fields, then ACT really, really does not do a very good job. Okay, next slide is some of the cost issues that we have for Compass, Accuplacer versus ALEKS PPL. Well, our Compass and Accuplacer, I know a lot of colleges are getting free use of Accuplacer, and that's primarily because there is the corporation that owns Accuplacer, Pearson, is actually kind of subsidizing the placement tool for a lot of these colleges. But when we were on the Compass, we were paying just less than $5 per attempt, and we paid for the first 2 attempts for a student, and after that, they had to pay for it themselves. When we started the ALEKS pilot project, for 18 months we had free use, unlimited use of the ALEKS PPL. After that, we ended up having to pay $25 per assessment, and that sounds like a lot of money, and it is a significant investment, but I think that that's the key word there. It is an investment in student success. It's not a cost, it's an investment, and I think that that's where people, administrators especially, view it as a cost, and what I will show you is that we view it as an investment in our students. But because of the number of colleges within the state of Iowa that have started adopting the ALEKS PPL, along with community colleges and four-year universities, as of February 1st, 2016, our cost is now $15 per student. And that makes it, I mean, that clearly significantly cut the cost to us, but it really actually kind of eliminates this argument that it's too expensive. I'm going to address those issues here in the next slide. And in the next slide, we're talking about, okay, what does Compass and Accuplacer have for students to remediate? And Compass and Accuplacer, you can purchase modules that will basically say, okay, if you need to have a module for pre-calculus, here's a textbook, basically. It's static, it's not dynamic, and it doesn't really fit everybody. It's designed to fit all people, not the individual student. Whereas the ALEKS PPL creates this prep and learning module that is designed for the actual student who took the assessment, and therefore will drill on them the skill sets that they need to be successful at the next level. And that's the big difference. And what we found was that, as I said earlier, if they spend 5 or more hours in the prep and learning module, they will place into the next level. And in fact, in the fall of 2015, 92 students spent 5 or more hours in the prep and learning modules and placed in the next level math course. And of those 92 students, 58 or 53, which is about 58%, were successful in that course. That saved over $33,000 in tuition. That was 2 times as much as it cost for us to implement ALEKS at the $15 amount. So we saved our students $33,000 in tuition, which from a community college standpoint, that's significant because as anybody who's in the community college world understands, we have a high default rate on student loans, and the federal government is looking into these high default rates. And if we can minimize student debt, I think we've done ourselves a big favor moving forward. So that's significant, and we're continuing to see that. Now, why did we have 42% of the students not succeed that placed up? Well, there were a lot of students that left. There were a lot of students that dropped out, and some of the students actually just failed. And the withdrawals, that's very hard to pinpoint. We don't really capture enough data to say why they withdrew. And we're moving forward on our back end, our administrative software, to really capture more information on why is a student leaving Iowa Central. And that's one of the things that that we actually are looking at doing moving forward. So, okay, now the next slide basically is a diagnostic tool to help figure out what a student is actually doing. So when you get a Compass score, you basically get this raw score or Accuplacer that really doesn't tell you a lot about what the skill set of that student is. But when you take a look at the ALEKS PPL, in the next several slides, you'll see this. This is just a snapshot of what we see as an instructor looking at the individual scores for these students. And as you can see, it takes a look at it, and it basically slices this down to the outcome level. So I can see exactly what is going on. And I'm going to move to the next slide, which has some more information. It creates a pie chart for you to see what your students have, and it lists what the student can do and what the student can't do. And like I said, it is a very, very, very good diagnostic set of tools that I can get as a report for a student. So if a student comes into my office and wants to talk to me a little bit about their placement score and why they didn't place as high as they thought they should, I can pull up their file and I can say, well, you're not very strong in these areas, these particular areas, and we can talk about those. And the Prep and Learning module is designed to help strengthen you in those areas that you're weak so you can get to the next level. So these diagnostic tools are very, very crucial for us. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is how do we put ALEKS out there for our students? We actually, on campus, it's pretty straightforward. We have our testing center, But we have a lot of students. We have a very, very high or large footprint in terms of student who come from the area high schools coming to Iowa Central. We have one of the highest penetration of any community college in the state of Iowa in their service area for getting students from the high schools to come in. Part of that is we have a lot of concurrent enrollment students, but we also have a lot of students that are just at the area high schools that want to come to Iowa Central. So we needed to somehow make it as easy as possible for a student to take the ALEKS PPL at their high school. And in other words, make it like Compass had. When we had the pilot project, we were not allowed to do anything because we were under a pilot project, so we were within a large group. Once we went to the paid version, the ALEKS Corporation contacted us almost immediately. Once we started paying, they contacted us. We went to the paid version in February 1st of this year, and I think in late February, early March, I got a contact from ALEKS PPL, and they asked if we would like to do to integrate ALEKS into our administrative software, and I said yes. So I contacted our tech support, and I sent contact information to ALEKS. Their tech people sent the script files to ours. We used Datatel, and they were able to implement it, and I'll talk about it as we get through here. But as you can see, what we've done in the area high schools is that our testing center coordinator has set up each of the high schools in our service area as a testing center, just like they would have for Compass. Each of the counselors in the high schools are our proctors and will proctor those assessments for us. Any student outside of our service area is free to contact our testing coordinator, and they will then arrange for a local high school, local testing center in the area where that student is for them to take the ALEKS PPL assessment proctored from there. They can always take it unproctored, but they can't use it for placement. But that's an option they have. And our current approved testing centers are testing centers, colleges, universities, and high schools. Those are the only three things that we allow. And if you look on the far right of that slide, you will notice that there's a long list of the area high schools that we have set up. And I'll talk a little bit about how the student sees this in the next slide. Okay, the next slide basically says that once a student gets accepted to Iowa Central, and that's almost immediate. In fact, not even accepted. If they apply to Iowa Central, we automatically generate a username and password for them, and it's called a Triton username and password. We are the Triton, so therefore we call it a Triton Pass. When you look at the Triton Pass, when the student logs in, they will notice under their padlock, which unlocks all of this. And the reason we did it this way was because a lot of people wait for once a student is accepted to give them their username and password. But we realize that students have to send financial aid, they have to send transcripts, whatever. So if they apply, they're automatically given this so they can have access to uploading their financial aid information, so on and so forth. Under one of the choices, they have the ability to select the ALEKS assessment. They select the ALEKS assessment, and it takes them to a screen where they basically choose where they're taking the assessment from. If it's from an area high school, they will have their high school name listed there. They choose that and hit submit. If it's outside the service area, then they'll just choose other, or they will have given a code by which they would fall under that might be a little bit different. Then they will have a screen that pops up that basically starts them in the ALEKS PPL, where they will go through. They don't have to enter the username and password. It is the same one for the Triton Pass. Their demographics are uploaded. Everything is all done for them. They do their pre-assessment exposure to ALEKS, so they learn how to graph, how to enter things. They take their assessment. the minute they're done with their assessment, that information is automatically sent to our administrative software, which is uploaded so advisors can see it immediately. It's seamless. It took us only, literally, about 2 hours on our end to get this up and going. And I kind of mentioned that there. So unlike before, where our testing coordinator had to run a report all the time, at the end of every week, to upload the new scores and then put them into DataTel, all she has to do now is it's just automatically sent, and it's great. It works very, very well. And like I said, it was almost too easy. It was kind of scary. It was about 2 weeks from the time the initial contact with our tech people made contact with Alex's tech people. But part of that delay was the fact that we were updating our databases and we were spending time doing that. But 2 hours in the afternoon, they got it up and going, and we did a couple of test runs, worked just fine. So we do have, though, information that we send out to every student, and I refer to it as an ALEKS brochure, and I'm just going to show you a copy of what it looks like. It's a trifold brochure. So if you look on the far right of the brochure, it says Save Time and Money with ALEKS. That's the front. And then the back of it is in the middle panel, and that has a list of the people to contact, myself, my developmental math coordinator, our testing center coordinator, and any tech support at ALEKS. And then the far right or left third is where they can actually record their assessments and when they took them if they want to have that listed there. The inside is where it gets into some more detail. We describe what ALEKS is, and if you read this brochure, and I'm more than happy to send it to anybody if they would like it, but if you read this brochure, we never use the word test. We only use the word assessment. Test has a connotation of pass-fail, assessment it's much less than that. So we automatically call it assessment. We don't call it a test. It's a hard thing to do because we always think of it as a test, but students who take it and you call it a test, they think, well, what happens if I fail, ALEKS? But when we say you need to take the ALEKS assessment, they don't make that same statement, like what happens if I fail, because they don't even connect this idea of failure with an assessment. So we explain what ALEKS is, why we do it. We explain how much money you can save by using ALEKS for proper placement. We give our cutoff scores and what classes fit in there, and some other more general information. And as I said, if anybody would like this, I'm more than happy to send that out to you. Just shoot me an email. Now, getting on to this, I want to talk a little bit about our success rates that we are seeing with ALEKS PPL. This is what we saw prior to ALEKS PPL. We saw a pass and fail rate that was about 56% of the students passed and about 44% failed. Okay, and we're calling a fail DWF. This is all college level success rates. Okay, and that's not bad, but it's not very good, to be honest with you. That 44% is a rather disturbing number. When we take a look at all college level math courses and all college level math courses without ALEKS, this is where things get even more interesting. As I said, we had about half our students placed with ALEKS and about other half placed with the other, ACT, SAT, Compass, and Accuplacer. And what you can see here is very startling. Our college level success rates are just out of this world. 79% passed, and the rest were either a withdrawal or a failure. Whereas if you take a look at the non-ALEKS placement scores, you're only looking at 42% success rate. And that's significant. And that by itself was enough to say, listen, we were told when we were looking at ALEKS as a pilot project that their data shows that we should see a pretty good success rate. And what we've found is that not only have we seen that, but in a lot of cases we've exceeded what we were told we were going to get. And I'm going to break this down a little bit further here when I take a look at some of these are developmental math uh, success rates when we're dealing with ALEKS versus non-ALEKS. Now, what you have to remember is we're still not talking about really, really high success rates. We're talking about 47% of the developmental math students were successful with ALEKS and about 25% if they took some other placement. Not very good at all, but what I can tell you is that within the withdrawal rate, 31% of those students that placed with ALEKS PPL and withdrew from the developmental math course took the ALEKS PPL placement one more time and passed or placed higher. You got to remember, developmental math is it's the credit hours don't count; they just have to take it. So what these students found was that they got so far into it, they realized that they were ready to try ALEKS again. They took it, and we found 31% of those that withdrew actually were able to place higher into the next level course, whether it was into a college level or maybe the next level developmental math course. So that was encouraging, and we are continuing to work on improving or increasing our success rates in developmental math, and we're seeing improvement, but the one thing that has helped us significantly is the fact that we now know that the students who are placed into those courses are actually ones who should be there, not just some random toss of the coin, which in essence what Compass was telling us was that we could flip a coin and do a better job of placing. And so knowing that these students are supposed to be here allows us to move away from that issue and actually look at it from a different perspective and say, well, now what can we do within the course to make them more successful? How do we motivate them, which is always a big deal. If we take a look at some of our college level courses, we've got our Math for the Liberal Arts, and we take a look at the success rate. It's a fairly high success rate for those non-ALEKS scores, but it's much, much better when you take a look at the ALEKS placement. It's a much higher percentage that does that. When we take a look at our college algebra and college algebra with trig, we see an even more startling result. We saw about 67% of those students that were placed with ALEKS PPL were successful, whereas we're talking, about 12% or so or less that were placed with other ones, with the other assessments, which is not very good. So clearly we're seeing much improved results, especially for those students going into STEM. And the last one is our Math 157, which is a statistics. And again, we're seeing very good results with statistics course. That's one of our largest courses that we see in terms of statistics as far as the number of students in it, other than our developmental math, which we count all of those three courses into one block. But statistics has a lot of students in it. So again, very good numbers there. And then we take a look at non-traditionals versus traditional students. And as you can see, it didn't really matter. The non-traditional students, by the way, I include non-traditional as being a student who has been out of college or out of high school for 4 or more years. So they would be over the age of 22 typically. And what we see there is, again, solid improvement in the success rates for non-traditional students. We also see a fairly high withdrawal and drop rate, and a lot of that is due to the fact that non-traditionals usually have other things like jobs or family that they have to worry about, and that can be a negative or a drain on their resources to put into the class. So again, ALEKS does a very good job of improving those scores. If we take a look at some of our concurrent enrollment students, those students that are in our area high schools, we see very good results with that. And the same way if this is our college, our pre-calculus course, if you will, and then this is our statistics. So we see also some very good. Now we see a very high number of withdrawals and failures there, abnormally high. And this is rather new data, so I have not looked into it. But my guess is that we had 1 or 2 high schools that had offered statistics, but for some unforeseen reason they couldn't offer it after they had already enrolled the students. And my guess is that since they couldn't offer it, those students fell out, meaning they were counted as a withdrawal. So, but I haven't looked into that. I see there's a question, are there any studies that support these results? Well, what I'm talking about for the studies, just very quickly, this is all our own data. And if you're referring to this data, this is just the raw data that I've collected and put together to show this. If we're talking about studies that support other things, then I've said a lot of things that I'm speaking from my own experience, and I'm not saying that there are studies that support any of the things that I'm saying, but of 25 years of teaching, I kind of get a feel for how things are. So I think we see students that are within some of our areas, like students that are outside the age group, so they're non-traditional students. What we can see from just anecdotal evidence is that a lot of these people are finding that their outside commitments take precedence, a job, family, whatever. So I think that's pretty true for a lot of students. But I'm not saying that's true for all of them. I think there are some anecdotal evidence. And I'm just about out of time here, and I'm really kind of at the last slide here. But basically, I'll just quickly go through here. We are hoping to get ALEKS PPL as a state-sponsored assessment for all placement into mathematics. It's supposed to go to the state legislature on 2017, this session, so it'll be in January. I'm not sure where it's going to go with that. We have basically feedback from area high schools that say they like ALEKS PPL. They think it's doing a great job for them. We've had very few issues with area high schools utilizing or implementing ALEKS PPL out there. The one thing that we do try to do is remind them that this is not a practice exam like they had for Compass or ACT. We suggest that they only give the ALEKS assessment in their January of their senior year because it's only valid for 12 months. And if you take it too early and you don't get placed into a class before the 12 months is over, it no longer counts. Turns out 13 out of the 15 community colleges in the state of Iowa will be using ALEKS PPL for placement by the end of this academic year. And our testing center coordinator is doing a workshop with ALEKS and other testing center coordinators around the state to try to make sure that this is a seamless transition over to ALEKS from what we used to have, which is Compass. So that's it. That's all I have. Here is my final slide, which has all of my contact information. So if you have questions, I encourage you to email me. If you try to call me, that might be a little bit harder to deal with, playing phone tag, but I am more than happy to talk to you. I've done a lot of conference calls with other colleges, not just within the state of Iowa, but all over the United States, and they're asking for our data, and they view it as a positive step for their institution too. So I would like to thank everybody for viewing this webinar, and as I said, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me, and thank you very much.
Great. John, thank you so much for walking us through all of that. I think there was just some fantastic information there, and just the results that you've seen in a short period of time are wonderful. So to echo John's point, if there are questions that come up that are specific to the presentation or specific to the experience John has had, I think please take him up on the offer to contact him directly. Otherwise, please feel free to contact us to learn more about ALEKS PPL specifically if you would like to see it or see how it might be able to fit into your particular school. Again, we'll be doing a follow-up afterwards, so please feel free to do that. And I did just want to add one additional note, which is in a large number of the partnerships that we have with institutions. There are over 100 schools now using ALEKS PPL as their math placement software. And a large number of those actually also looked at redesigning their math curriculum within the developmental and college algebra pre-calculus space so they could work in sync with each other. So we worked very closely to have ALEKS used as a course product, so it felt like a continuous experience from placement through to completion. And we'd be happy to discuss the various different types of redesigns we've been involved in and how we could support that as well. I did see a question come through from Chris Day on does ALEKS PPL do anything with reading, writing placement? It's in the works. We are currently developing that right now. I'm afraid I don't have an ETA for you at this point in time, but we do hope to have a singular experience for placement across math and reading and writing. Okay, well, thanks again, John, for your time. That was and for your presentation. That really was fantastic, and I look forward to seeing everyone at the next session where we're discussing the Learning Science Platform, which is our new adaptive platform to turn own authored material and open educational resources as well as McGraw-Hill content into an adaptive learning environment. But again, John, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.